Hey guys, a very warm welcome to a super interesting episode of the Fisdom Wealthcast. आज हमारे साथ एक बहुत ही special guest है. We have Mr. Taher Badshah, who is the president and CIO of Invesco Mutual Fund. So Taher, a very warm welcome to the Fisdom Wealthcast.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Nirav, for having me and hosting me on your platform.
So Tahir, without any further ado, let me just get to my first question. And right before that, some context. हम देख रहे हैं कि काफी महीनों से जो ब्रॉडर मार्केट्स है वो काफी वोलेटाइल तो रही है, बट काफी हद तक एक बेरिश सा अंडरटोन चल रहा है. एक द अंडरटोन इज ऑफ डाउट, ऑफ क्वेश्चंस, एंड नॉट एज मच ऑफ confidence being exuded, at least if we go by the headline numbers in the markets. So investors, like at any given point in time, उनके मन में एक ही सवाल होता है, आज भी एक ही सवाल है कि मार्केट क्या बोलता है. So what is your reading of the market? Do you think it is really a show of underconfidence, or is it that the market is being very selective and they are moving into a wait and watch and be sure of what you pick, sort of a mode? So what's your reading on the market? What's your response to market क्या बोलता है?
So basically, Nirav, this year essentially, market is going through a transition. Okay, and large part of the market's movement पिछले कुछ सालों में has been significantly dictated by more of macro trends and global trends and more importantly central bank actions, as we all know. So that continues to dominate a bulk of the market behavior. फिर उसके साथ साथ मतलब जुड़े हुए कुछ individual countries और regions के features होते हैं, but by and large the backdrop, as we all know, पिछले कुछ सालों से, and especially it was the case even pre-COVID and post-COVID. During COVID also we saw that central banks played a very important role in guiding the markets, and abhi bhi matlab markets therefore have now got used to central bank actions, and central bank actions एक महत्वपूर्ण पार्ट हो गए मार्केट के. तो मतलब डिटैच करना भी बहुत मुश्किल है. अब हो ये रहा है कि at this stage, the way the economic parameters are evolving around the globe, central bank action also is not very clear, and central banks also do not have sufficient data to be able to conclude one way or the other. अब उन्होंने मतलब 2022 में एक पाथ चुन लिया था, which is basically कि, और वो that was based on the inflation trends which were emerging towards the end of 2021, and got further entrenched in the early part of 22, particularly after the Russia-Ukraine conflict broke out, जिसके कारण commodity prices में हमने भारी असर देखा, and inflation trends became even more acute. तो एक तरीके से एक डायरेक्शन सेंट्रल बैंक्स ने ले लिया था उस समय कि अभी यहाँ से रेट्स जो दरों की प्रक्रिया है वो यहाँ से बढ़ने लगेगी, एंड इंटरेस्ट रेट्स के दर बढ़ने लगे थे बेसिकली फ्रॉम दैट टाइम ऑनवर्ड्स. एंड तब से हमने देखा है कि मतलब ग्लोबली दैट फीचर हैज बीन देयर कि मतलब मॉनेटरी पॉलिसीज को रिवर्स किया जाए, इंटरेस्ट रेट्स को कंट्रोल किया जाए, इंटरेस्ट रेट्स को बढ़ाया जाए, इन्फ्लेशन को कंट्रोल किया जाए. दैट हैज बीन द ऑब्जेक्टिव. अब ये प्रोसेस इज नॉट फुल्ली कंप्लीट, मतलब 2022 में जब शुरुआत हुई, इंटरेस्ट रेट्स की प्रक्रिया अभी भी जारी है, एंड उसका असर हमने अभी तक पूरी हद तक देखा नहीं है. सेंट्रल बैंक्स ऑब्वियसली क्या चाहते हैं ये है कि इकोनॉमीज को कुछ इस लेवल पे लाके थोड़ा स्लो डाउन कर दिया जाए ताकि इन्फ्लेशन कंट्रोल में आ जाए. दैट इज बेसिकली द ऑब्जेक्टिव अराउंड द वर्ल्ड. अब वो जो प्रक्रिया है वो अभी भी कंप्लीट नहीं हुई है, इट इज मिडवे, और वो इतनी जल्दी से मतलब हो नहीं रहा है जितना सेंट्रल बैंक्स एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे थे. तो करीब यूएस में हम जानते हैं कि 400-450 बेसिस पॉइंट्स इंटरेस्ट रेट हाइक हो चुके हैं पिछले एक साल में. इंडिया में 200-250 बेसिस पॉइंट्स इंटरेस्ट रेट इंक्रीज हो गए हैं in the last 1 year, and yet the economies are not kind of slowing down to the extent that it was required to. Inflation somewhat has been coming down, but not to the extent which is desired. तो I think ये जो process है वो अभी भी जारी है, and जब तक market को मतलब वो clarity नहीं आ जाती कि this process is considered as complete one way or the other, मतलब in terms of either inflation having been brought under control or the economy having slowed down to the desired extent such that inflation comes down, तब तक market will find it difficult to get direction. At one level, India markets पे अगर focus करें तो इंडिया के लिए challenge relatively less रहा. हम जानते हैं कि 2022 में we did reasonably well, as a market standalone, I mean, compared to the rest of the world, particularly we stood out. So we outperformed the global markets anywhere between 10 and 15%, and we also somehow or the other, in a very difficult backdrop, managed to actually eke out something like 4 to 7% return, depending upon whether you look at large caps or small caps and mid caps, which is not a bad outcome. We have to remember that quite a lot of that was also possible क्योंकि इंडिया एक reopening mode में था, and we were basically after the COVID lockdowns, we were kind of normalizing as an economy. And India actually एक हद तक मतलब we did quite well on the COVID effort, and to that extent we were able to open up. तो एक pent up वाली जो activity थी in many ways was manifesting itself, and that was leading to a situation जहाँ पे मतलब markets were constantly getting surprised because market की एक expectation बन रही थी, and actually corporates and the economy was delivering something which was more than the expectations which were being set. And this was going on for almost 4 to 5 quarters consistently, and that led to और जब भी ऐसा माहौल बन जाता है जहाँ पे मतलब the economy does much better than the expectations of the market, then the markets go up. And vice versa also, that जहाँ पे मतलब expectations को disappoint हो जाता है, the markets then tend to trend down and adjust to the lower expectations. So I think वो जो एक cycle था, that is what we have gone through as a country, and maybe as some other countries around the world as well. इंडिया का चैलेंज वैसे भी थोड़ा कम था because of interest rates and inflation being somewhat better in terms of. So I think we've gone through that phase. अब यहाँ से प्रॉब्लम ये है कि एक तो मैंने जैसे समझाया कि मतलब global backdrop is a little uncertain, particularly with respect to the central bank actions. और दूसरी चीज ये है कि मतलब फ्रॉम एन इंडिया पर्सपेक्टिव अगर देखें तो मतलब वी फाइंड इट डिफिकल्ट कि अब यहाँ से पॉजिटिव सरप्राइजेस आएंगे कहाँ से. There is a certain element of expectation which the market is in anyways building, whether it is with regard to uh, you know India's economic cycle overall getting better after a long time, India's investment cycle getting better, government policies getting reasonably constructive in many ways, India having advantages in terms of political stability, etc., etc. So many of those factors already एक तरीके का एक expectation है market में, वो एक समझ already है. अब यहाँ से इसको beat कैसे किया जाएगा, that is what the market will probably look forward to. तो market की movement I think will be guided on the basis of situation यहाँ पे मतलब you find कि भाई what are the expectations of the market और उसको भी beat किया जा रहा है, तो then the markets will then start making fresh moves or new moves or new highs. जब तक वो नहीं होता है, और शायद जो माहौल as of now है global as well as domestic, it looks like it's going to be difficult to beat expectations. Even though the situation is decent, but the thing is that market एक लेवल पे एक हद तक अपनी ऑलरेडी एक मंशा बना चुका है, और उसको बीट करने के लिए जगह बनानी है. तो जब तक वो नहीं होता, I think it will be a little difficult for markets to actually find new highs. I feel that we will probably have a bit of a sideways year, maybe a somewhat time correction, maybe some absolute correction also. That will be the feature of 23, and there are reasons for me to believe that 24 would probably then start looking up. So 23 will be a year in which you capture some opportunities due to the lackluster performance of the market, and then you wait for your potential returns in 24 or beyond.
Absolutely, आपने ये बहुत ही ज़रूरी बात की towards the end. So while we spoke about the central bank actions not yet arriving at a conclusion, or it is not yet complete. It's still WIP. अभी भी work in progress चल रहा है, और markets को clearly they are on the lookout for some clarity on where are we headed, at least in terms of controlling inflation or the growth prospects, right? आपने बखूबी से ये इस चीज की भी विश्लेषण की कि इंडिया किस हिसाब से आउट परफॉर्म कर चुका है ग्लोबल मार्केट्स को. एंड मोस्ट गुड न्यूज जो है वो फैक्टर इन हो चुका है. जो भी अपसाइड पॉजिटिव सरप्राइजेस है विद इन द रेल्म ऑफ एक्सपेक्टेशंस एंड प्रोबेबिलिटीज, वो फैक्टर इन हो चुके हैं, प्राइस इन हो चुके हैं, चाहे वो इंडिया की पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी हो या चाहे वो इंडियाज इम्प्रूविंग इन्वेस्टमेंट साइकिल. बट साथ ही साथ टुवर्ड्स द एंड there was a very almost definitive tone that this year is going to be characterized by challenges. थोड़ा challenging समय सा रहेगा, थोड़ा sideways रहेगा, but what is opportunity? Simply you turn challenges on its head and it turns into opportunity. So whenever markets go sideways, we also are on the lookout for certain themes or certain plays that are available at attractive valuations or attractive positions in general, who are at the cusp of a breakout. Once a few other things align, it will really break out and be in the first order of benefit. तो इस बैकग्राउंड, इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट और पर्सपेक्टिव से आपके हिसाब से क्या ऐसे टेलविंड्स है जो ये ग्रोथ साइकिल को ट्रिगर कर सकता है ब्रॉडर मार्केट लेवल पर? क्या ऐसे फैक्टर्स हैं, और जब वो ट्रिगर होता है तब कौन से ऐसे थीम्स है जो सबसे पहले बेनिफिट करेंगे, विच विल बी इन द फर्स्ट ऑर्डर ऑफ बेनिफिटिंग फ्रॉम सच अ साइक्लिकल अपटिक?
So, while I did allude to the fact that 2023 and maybe if not 23, आने वाले 12-15 महीने will be that period of readjustment, because वहाँ पे उस दौरान मुझे लगता है कि central bank policies will probably find its way through, and तब तक मतलब जो उनको economic output देखना है, whether it is in the form of a slowdown or whether it is in the form of lower inflation, वो भी आपको नजर आ जाएगा, is my expectation over the next 12-15 months. So once we are past that phase, during that phase is when we expect that the Indian markets also will have to somewhat languish and just lie low. But when we are past that phase, then we know that we already have some of the important structural drivers which are there for India to demonstrate a better economic cycle in the coming 3 to 5 years compared to what it has probably been able to show, let's say, in the prior 5 years. We have, I don't want to discuss many of the issues that we went through in the last 4 5 years. Everybody is aware of it. Even before COVID, we had a few things that we were going through, and so I think there are reasons to believe that the overall cycle, India's economic cycle, will be better in the coming 3 to 5 years compared to what it was. Uh, I can, when we look at when we look at the overall, any economy for that matter, and India is also no exception. There are typically four important constituents of any economy. One is the banks, the second is the corporates, third is the governments, and the fourth is the households. All these comprise of the economy and they interact with each other. अब इंडिया के केस में अगर हम देखें तो एक्चुअली आफ्टर अ वेरी लॉन्ग पीरियड ऑफ टाइम ऑल दीज फोर आर in a somewhat better situation, or they are healthy on most metrics, or at least हम ये चारों फैक्टर्स की बैलेंस शीट्स के बारे में अगर बात करें तो दे आर इन रीजनेबली डिसेंट कंडीशन. सो आफ्टर अ वेरी लॉन्ग पीरियड ऑफ टाइम वी नाउ हैव अ कॉन्फ्लुएंस वेयर ऑल दीज फोर in terms of their respective balance sheets, चाहे वो बैंक्स की balance sheets हो, which as we all know have significantly undergone repair in India in the last 7 8 years, and in a reasonably healthy condition, and not just private sector banks this time around, even some of the public sector banks, at least many of the top tier public sector banks also are in decent shape. The second, when we look at it from the point of view of corporate balance sheets, even that we know is in very good condition and at an aggregate level. And many of the large corporate group stresses that we had seen, particularly during 2012 and 2015-16, उसके बाद हमने वैसे कुछ एपिसोड्स अभी हाल में देखे नहीं हैं. And by and large, many of the corporates have been able to significantly deleverage. Many of those who had significant amount of stress, it was almost a common feature across many corporate groups. That is not the case right now. So even corporate balance sheets are in a relatively better condition than any time in the past at an aggregate level. Third is basically जब हम इंडिया गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया की बैलेंस शीट्स की बात करते हैं तो इवन दैट barring the COVID stress, जहाँ पे fiscal deficit थोड़ा elevate हो गया, but and that too was managed quite well as far as India is concerned. And जो fiscal deficit expansion हुआ during COVID years, वो न केवल इंडिया के साथ, मतलब it has happened throughout the world. So it is not something that हमारे साथ ही हुआ है. एंड लास्ट अगर हम हाउस होल्ड बैलेंस शीट्स की बात करें तो मतलब एट एन एग्रीगेट लेवल, हालांकि ओवर पीरियड ऑफ टाइम वी नेवर हैड अ सिचुएशन वे इंडिया में हाउस होल्ड बैलेंस शीट स्ट्रेस सिचुएशन में आ गए हो. और एट एन एग्रीगेट लेवल हमेशा से मतलब ठीक ठाक ही रहा है. यस, वी हैव हैड सिचुएशंस वेयर urban balance sheets or urban household balance sheets are somewhat better than rural balance sheets, or we've had times when the reverse has happened, when the rural balance sheets look relatively stronger compared to urban balance sheets. But by and large, on an aggregate, urban Indian households are also in a reasonably decent shape. थोड़ा बहुत India का leverage, household leverage is going up over the last 7 8 years. We are all getting used to more credit consumption. as we all are going through and experiencing, but it is still way below what it is as a percentage of leverage in other countries around the world as a percentage of household incomes. We are at about, maybe we've gone up from perhaps about 3-4% to 10-11% in the last decade, but there are countries which are sitting at 60, 80, 100% of household income as leverage, so as debt on their household balance sheets. तो वी आर फार फ्रॉम दैट. सो एक तरीके से जो देखा जाए कि मतलब अगर आपकी स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट अगर बैलेंस शीट्स की of all these four constituents is positive or is in a happy situation, then I think it is quite likely, it is not very difficult to expect that your economic growth cycle will be in an advancing mode. Yes, you will go through a little bit of ups and downs for sure, but by and large कोई ऐसा challenge नहीं है जो आपको रोक के रख सकता है.
Hmm.
In the past, we've seen the banking as a sector has been challenged, and banking was a very is an important part of the economy. वो pivot करता है economy को. अगर banking system की balance sheets अगर सही नहीं रही तो it cannot drive the economy. Same is the case at times when we've had situations when the government's balance sheet has been stressed, and that also creates a problem. Corporate की balance sheet अगर stress होती है तो investment cycle completely रुक जाती है, especially private investment cycle. So I think that scenario is not there right now, and therefore we are kind of confident in expecting that, look, India can demonstrate a better economic cycle on an aggregate basis. But we also cannot be distanced, and we have some bit of global linkages for sure, and to that extent, जो दुनिया भर में हो रहा है, that is probably that readjustment post COVID we are going to go through, and other countries are also going through their own cycles. And once we are out of that readjustment process is when I expect that things will then start becoming lot. So I think therefore to that extent ये जो phase है वो investment वाला phase है from the point of view of investors. This is a time when you have to actually exercise patience. You have to be, take these opportunities, these downdrafts, जो dull situation of the market, lackluster, low levels of interest. I think those are the times when actually you can do a lot of your portfolio construction, your stock select. I mean, your at fund management level, we do our stock selection, our sector selection, etc. And at the client's end, he has to do his strategy selection as to which fund he wants to invest in, and which direction he wants to take, and how does he want to allocate his savings. So I think that is that period that we all are going to go through. That's how we have to see this market at this stage.
एब्सोल्युटली आपने बहुत सारी इंटरेस्टिंग पर्सपेक्टिव्स दिए स्पेशली द स्प्लिट बिटवीन कॉर्पोरेट एंड गवर्नमेंट एंड हाउस होल्ड बैलेंस शीट्स रियली पुट थिंग्स इनटू पर्सपेक्टिव बट deleveraging की बात करते हुए बैलेंस शीट की बात करते हुए दिस लीड्स मी टू माय नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन व्हिच इज अराउंड अ वेरी स्पेसिफिक सेक्टर दैट हैज बीन इन द न्यूज़ फॉर क्वाइट सम टाइम कुछ महीने पहले पॉजिटिव कनोटेशंस के साथ एंड आज थोड़े नर्वसनेस के साथ but it is about the banking sector, the banking plus NBFC pack. There are a few structural tailwinds to the sector. The NPA situation is resolving, net interest margins are improving, credit offtake is expected, private capex अभी तक तो चाहिए उस हिसाब से नहीं बढ़ा, बट उम्मीद है कि वो काफी जल्दी पिकअप कर जाएगा एंड द एंटायर वर्चुअस साइकिल विल स्टार्ट किकिंग इन. बट इसके साथ साथ हमने देखा कि कुछ महीने पहले की बात है जहां पर पीएसयू बैंक्स काफी अच्छे से परफॉर्म किए थे इन टर्म्स ऑफ शेयर प्राइसेस, बट नाउ हियर वी आर जहां पर सारा का सारा निफ्टी बैंक का जो पैक है इट इज continuously under a lot of pressure. It is trading within a select range, and there is a fair sense that that pack is under pressure. And साथ ही साथ हम देख रहे हैं कि NBFCs may also be under some pressure. So what are your views on banking plus NBFC as a pack? Do you still see upside value left, or do you think that probably going slightly slow on them right now could also be okay? What's your general view on the sector?
So I think generally, I think if I take a 2-3 year view, Mujal, I'm quite positive on the banking space, and we have been positive actually almost since 2021. वो अलग बात है कि 21 and some part of 22 तक banking sector did not participate in the markets rally at all, and in fact that is why our conviction became even higher, because valuations uske compared to the rest of the market were only becoming more and more attractive. And जैसे मैंने आपको शुरुआत में समझाया कि मतलब बैंकिंग सेक्टर एक्चुअली जो 12 से 17 18 19 तक का जो माहौल रहा, 6-7 साल, it has gone through its own pain of a readjustment and recalibration of their balance sheets. वो phase already पीछे रह चुका है, and now we are looking at it starting from a clean slate. आई थिंक 2022 के मिडिल से जब से हमने मतलब थोड़ा क्रेडिट साइकिल इंप्रूव होते हुए देखा है इंडिया में, वे credit growth has started to move from low single digits to now healthy double digits. That is when actually finally banking sector started to perform. I think that journey is still on, and banks ki overall capability in order to lend and their intention to lend is much better than what it was in the last few years. मतलब 2019 18-19 से मैं बात करूं तो मतलब it was a situation where both the lenders and the borrowers were in a face off situation.
Hmm.
Lender did not want to lend, borrower did not want to borrow.
Hmm.
Okay, क्योंकि borrower को opportunity नहीं दिखती थी, and lender was in a situation where his balance sheet was stressed, so उसको incremental lending करने की इच्छा नहीं थी.
Hmm.
Now we are coming to a situation where there is an appetite on both sides. The
Correct.
lender also is in a reasonably decent shape and he wants to lend, and then there is a borrower also जहाँ पे उसकी appetite धीरे धीरे बढ़ रही है. So I
Hmm.
think this cycle is something which is still just begun, and it should accelerate, or at least it should hold up, if not accelerate,
Hmm.
going forward on a 3 year scale, at least if I.
Hmm.
और हमने शायद एक आध साल ही देखा है, not even 1 year of the start of the improvement in the credit cycle.
Hmm.
However, I think in the more recent past जो हमने जो excitement देखी banking sector के अंदर, and then after that we've seen last month and a half or so
Yeah.
it has gone into a pause mode, is because of the issues which have developed around the corporate group, which have brought once again to the fore certain issues with regard to balance sheet health of banks, because this has happened almost every uh, on every occasion in the last 2-3 years. मैंने अब जब हम कोविड क्वार्टर की शुरुआत से बात करें, June
Hmm.
2020, at every time whenever there was an issue with regard to, or there was a suspicion, or there was an anxiety around the economy, or a broader connotation, banks were always at the receiving end, क्योंकि banking का business एक leverage business होता है.
Hmm.
मतलब they basically lend, and उनके रिजर्व्स अगर 8 रुपए है तो वो 8 रुपए पे वो they give 60 70 80 rupees as loans, and that is how they basically so if that 80 rupees में से even if 5 rupees actually goes wrong, then it hits that 8 rupees
Yeah. Yeah.
directly, right? So it is a business of leverage, and therefore it is always perceived to be the one which will be the worst hit in at any time when there is a reasonably decent uncertainty. We
Hmm.
saw that at the end of during the COVID, I mean the worst quarter of the COVID lockdown. We then saw that again in during the early part of 2021 when the Delta wave hit us, the second wave. We saw that same situation. Banks were at the receiving end when the Omicron wave happened. We saw
Correct.
that again, that same situation arise when Russia-Ukraine conflict began in early part of 2022.
Hmm.
And once again, recently in the last some weeks, we've seen that cloud develop as a result of that corporate development,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
so I think always banking will have that risk, but by and large, like I'm saying, two things. One is that this cycle is still in its very early stages. Second is that banks are now are starting off in a position of much better strength than what they were,
Hmm.
and even up until now, some of those developments which have arisen in the system on account of stress at a perceived stress at one of the corporate groups, it is not likely to hurt the banking system, whether it be the public sector banks and of course not the private sector banks. It's not going to hurt them as much as what probably has been the case on earlier occasions when certain large corporate groups at a time have gone into stress and have created a problem for the banking sector as a whole. So I think the starting point banking system के लिए अच्छी बात ये है कि पिछले 3-4 साल में कुछ lending हुई ही नहीं. तो lending ही नहीं
Hmm.
हुई तो मतलब NPAs आने का सवाल नहीं उठता. So
Hmm.
I think the thing is that this cycle will has legs. It can continue for some time. Yes, you will probably see some of these interruptions, and banking sector valuations will over a period of time have to climb some of these walls of worries. We have seen another round of correction in the valuations of these banks. They're now becoming once again a lot more reasonable.
Mm,
Yes, for banks to get to valuations which are going to be very, very high, or exotic of the type which happens in other sectors, will always be a bit of a challenge. But they are at valuations which are quite reasonable at this stage. Even if you don't bank on valuation expansion from here on, I think they can deliver some decent earnings growth.
mm.
एटलीस्ट ये एक ऐसा सेक्टर है जहाँ पे अर्निंग्स की विजिबिलिटी फिर भी ठीक ठाक लग रही है. And therefore I think it is, even still right now, it is one of our preferred go to sectors as far as our portfolio allocations are concerned.
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel that's a wonderful thesis on the banking sector, and you put so much into perspective. Not just what's happening right now, but also what one can expect around it going ahead. अब इसके साथ ही साथ there are a few more sectors that have been capturing headlines. I feel technology as a sector, since quite some time, it has been under a lot of pressure. Like पिछले साल तो कुछ परफॉर्म किया ही नहीं है, the entire IT and tech pack, it did not really move anywhere, and it is only off late, and when I say off late, I mean very very recently, as recent as the past couple of weeks, and probably extended to a couple of months, that the IT and tech space has started showing some green shoots and some signs of promise. So is it actually a sign of promise? Are they actually green shoots, or it's just probably a happy coincidence that all the tech stocks are moving in a single direction? What's your understanding of the tech space, and what are your views, and rather how would you like investors to view the entire sector?
See, देखिए, typically IT or IT services, at least Indian IT services, is a somewhat less cyclical sector, or a reasonably secular sector, I would say. बहुत ज़्यादा उसमें डीप साइकिल्स आती नहीं है जैसे कि कमोडिटीज में आती है, शायद अदर एरियाज
Mm,
इन्वेस्टमेंट रिलेटेड बिजनेसेस में आती है. But yet I think we saw a very strong up move or up cycle in the tech space compared to its own history also, as a result of what happened during the COVID years.
mm,
And there was an acceleration, digital acceleration across the world, and
mm,
it obviously brought forward quite a lot of the growth. And alongside which markets भी और markets उस पर और भी ज़्यादा अपनी खुद की excitement उस पर डाल दिया. तो basically what happened was that valuations of the businesses went through a completely different paradigm. So I
mm,
think as a result, uh, and it was also that IT services is actually considered to be a growth sector, or growth sectors में जो हम जैसे हम टेक्निकल पार्लेंस में कहते हैं कि टर्मिनल वैल्यू ऑफ बिजनेसेस जो होता है, that
mm,
is very high. And terminal value of businesses is very significantly influenced by interest rate cycle.
mm,
It is negatively correlated with interest rate cycle. So interest rates नीचे होते हैं तो वो जो terminal value होती है growth oriented businesses की, वो बढ़ जाती है, and vice versa. So that also lent support to the valuations of tech companies, because in the COVID period, as we know, the interest rate cycle was actually uh, going downwards.
mm,
जब से वो रिवर्स हुआ है तो two things have happened. One is that it led to a coincidence where uh, जो इकोनॉमिक साइकिल, आई मीन जो इंटरेस्ट रेट साइकिल थी, वो रिवर्स हो गई सेंट्रल बैंक एक्शंस के कारण. एंड एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ दैट, टर्मिनल वैल्यू ऑफ आईटी कंपनी स्टार्टेड टू कम डाउन. दूसरी
mm,
ये हो गई थी कि ये इशू हो गया था कि देयर वाज अ फेयर बिट ऑफ एक्सेलरेशन ऑफ ग्रोथ ड्यूरिंग दैट पीरियड ऑफ कोविड. सो जो
mm,
डिमांड शायद आपको 2023 या 24 में आनी थी, वो 2021-22 में आ गई. Okay,
mm,
because everybody started to increase their consumption of technology and technology services.
mm,
And तीसरी बात ये हो गई कि साथ ही साथ, मतलब there were certain sector specific challenges which developed. Suddenly you saw a shortage of talent around, and a lot more attrition and churn, and जो supply होती है tech में,
mm,
वो it went through a difficult phase. And
mm.
cost की apprehension बढ़ गई कि IT services companies के लिए cost increase हो जाएगा. So I think all of that somehow came together at the same time, and that is what led to the underperformance of the sector during 2022. But जैसे हम अभी as of now, as we are sitting out here, two things have happened. One is that at least valuations have become somewhat more reasonable than what they were
Hmm.
in the peak of 2021 or early part of 22.
Hmm.
So I think that is one level of comfort. Second is that IT services की demand थोड़ी बहुत moderate हुई है. That's because of the prevailing slowdown or slowing down of the economies around the world, and the natural slowdown which has happened, which would have happened even otherwise, क्योंकि जो जैसे मैंने समझाया कि मतलब थोड़ा डिमांड प्रीपोन हो गया था, तो
Hmm.
ऑब्वियसली वो वहाँ पे भी एक पेंट अप डिमांड वाला फीचर चल रहा था, सो नाउ दैट इज ओवर, सो वी आर कमिंग बैक टू ट्रेंड ग्रोथ.
Hmm.
So I think that is readjustment is also happening right now in the tech sector,
Hmm.
that जो 12 13 14% वाली ग्रोथ कंपनीज थी वो शायद 8 9 10% वाली ग्रोथ पे आ गई है.
Correct.
And that has led to the underperformance. But I think the good part now is that at least even despite that, much of the sector has shown reasonable resilience. They are benefiting because their clients are going through that tough phase, so they are in a cost takeout mode. And much
Hmm.
of the IT services in India is benefiting क्योंकि उनको वो they are helping the clients take out costs. So
Correct.
that even in a tough environment, they have a certain value proposition that they can provide to their clients, and that is what is allowing IT services to actually gain share of the wallet of their clients. एंड साथ ही साथ वैल्यूएशन जैसे मैंने कहा बिकम अ लिटिल मोर एपेटाइजिंग, तो हमने भी मतलब कुछ ऐसे ही एक अप्रोच अपनाया है कि मतलब ड्यूरिंग 2022, much of 2022 we stayed light or little underweight on technology IT services, and more recently जब हमने थोड़ा बहुत पिछले 2 3 महीने से we've been seeing valuations correct, and we've also been observing that जो business में deterioration है वो इतना
Hmm.
ज्यादा नहीं है जितना मार्केट में ने सोचा था या एक्सपेक्ट किया था. तो आई
Hmm.
थिंक एक केस बन रहा है जहाँ पे वी कैन गेट बैक इनटू आईटी सर्विसेज. सो हमने एटलीस्ट एक अंडरवेट वाला जो स्टांस हमारा हुआ करता था वो अभी एक न्यूट्रल टू समवॉट पॉजिटिव स्टांस आप कह सकते हैं डेवलप हो रहा है. सो आई
Okay.
थिंक दैट इज व्हाट द जर्नी हैज बीन फॉर टेक्नोलॉजी. बट मैं कहूंगा कि देखिए मतलब फ्रॉम एन इंडिया स्टैंड पॉइंट मेरा मेरा ऐसा मानना है कि and I could be wrong, but I just feel that uh, you know in India, I think the we have been talking about this for a very long time in India. May we've had false starts. I know, I acknowledge that, but uh, an investment and manufacturing cycle, positive investment and manufacturing cycle and infrastructure cycle is the need of the hour.
Yeah.
Manufacturing in India as a percentage of GDP has come down to its lowest ever, at less than 15%. And we used to be more like 20%. At least we should be at 18, 19, 20%, that kind of a range. We will still probably have a services domination, but I think manufacturing is important in many ways. We know that, and whether it is with respect to job creation, whether it is with respect to overall productivity levels, and so on and so forth. So आई थिंक इंडिया में अगर कुछ चेंज होना है आने वाले सालों में, इन द नेक्स्ट 5 years, एंड जिसके लिए हमारे पास जैसे मैंने समझा बिल्डिंग ब्लॉक्स ऑलरेडी इन प्लेस है. देयर इज एन इन्वेस्टमेंट एपेटाइट, देयर इज अ लेंडर बोरोवर यू नो positivity,
Hmm.
government policy which is supportive in many ways. We are going through this temporary phase जहाँ पे interest rates have gone once again upwards.
Hmm.
वरना otherwise, interest rates were also supportive for the last 3 4 4
Yeah.
5 years. As interest rate cycle was actually going down. तो
Hmm.
वही एक एलिमेंट है जो शायद थोड़ा आउट ऑफ कंट्रोल चला गया है रिसेंट एज ऑफ नाउ ऑफ लेट, बट बाय एंड लार्ज ऑल द अदर एलिमेंट्स आर इन प्लेस. सो आई थिंक फॉर इंडिया, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन, and everything related to that infrastructure, I think those are the places where delta investment opportunities can come. Consumption has always been a strong point of India, but consumption is a discovered story in India. I mean,
Yeah.
what can surprise investors, and what India, not just surprise investors, what India has to surprise its own self with is actually what it can do with what it can do with regard to its industrialization cycle.
Correct.
And if we can deliver on that, so I think uh, uh, this time it is different वाला एक phase शायद यूज करना पड़े. बट आई थिंक maybe it may not be a wrong thing at this stage when we know that there are more rights than wrongs for this to happen. So I
Yeah.
feel a lot more confident about that part of the market and investment opportunities जो उस सेक्टर्स में आ सकती है. चाइना और इंडिया के बीच में अगर कॉन्ट्रास्ट करें तो एज ऑफ नाउ चाइना पीपल वांट टू गो टू चाइना फॉर China's consumption, not for China's infrastructure.
Hmm.
China की जो consumption, whether it is whatever type of consumption, I mean उनकी consumption is based on their per capita income. Uh,
Hmm.
but as of now, and उनके economy open भी reopen भी हो रही है, so they are going through the same phase that India was going through in the last 1.5 2 years
Yeah.
after.
Yeah.
Uh, Chinese भी पिछले 2 साल से घर में बैठे हुए हैं, so they are also now starting to go back to work. So I think when overseas investors are looking at between India and China, they are excited about China's recovery in consumption today. And when they're looking at India, they are probably, to my mind, I think for them the excitement should be the India's industrial and investment cycle, जो पहले चाइना का फोटे हुआ करता था. So I think
Hmm.
this is how I see the contrast.
The roles are somewhat swapped, you say.
Exactly, the roles have reversed, and the investment opportunity, at least in the short to medium term, seems to be of a different or has reversed.
Okay, very interesting. In fact, Tahir, you covered quite a variety of sectors here. We spoke about the very strong thesis that's backing the entire theme of manufacturing in India, although it has declined. You said that it has dropped significantly, and there is scope to improve. And there are, probably there are all the building blocks to really take it higher. We also spoke about consumption, and the most important takeaway is शायद इस बार सारे stars align हो जाएंगे. It has been in the waiting for a very long time. It
Very long
has
time.
yeah, and we have been missing it by a very narrow margin. It almost feels like a slip between the cup and the lip sort of a situation. It's just coming
तो
really
मतलब
close.
इंडिया की स्टोरी को अगर मतलब आने वाले 5 साल 10 साल में मतलब सही होना है तो दिस इफ इट डजंट if this part doesn't play out, then I don't think our story will work out the way we all not just what foreign investors or global investors
Yeah,
expect it to work out. Even we ourselves will be
yes,
disappointed. So
absolutely.
that is so again, I mean, from the point of view of a surprise element, this has to be the surprise that India has to deliver to the world.
Yeah.
It is known for its consumption. It is known for the fact that it is a very large, deep market. But what it is not known for is that it can develop a good manufacturing ecosystem as well. And that is what will throw up, to my mind, immense investment opportunities going forward if we can get that
Yes.
right.
So probably this entire building for the world, agenda, it really needs to uh, happen in action, in reality, and not just as a vision on the vision board.
No, no, बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल. And I think देखिए मतलब even from the government of India's you know policy. I mean, they when they started off when they put their thoughts into place or their policy or their
Yeah,
agenda into place, it started off with Make in India.
yeah,
But then Make in India is one thing. Yes, we have the support of the Indian large domestic market, and if we make for India, obviously, we. But many of the countries which have industrialized and have gone through huge productivity improvements and have which has led to uh, uh, value addition and per capita incomes are growing fast,
hmm.
have done so when they have exported to the world.
Yeah,
Okay, and whether they have a local market which is large in the case of, let's say, a China, or whether they have a local market which is not as large in the case of, let's say, a Bangladesh or a Vietnam. But the swing factor happens when they start to service the global markets, and उसमें एक clear difference आ जाता है. One clear difference is that when you are servicing global markets versus your own domestic markets, जो corporates होते हैं who undertake that exercise, they become a lot more productive in the bargain. क्योंकि when you are supplying to your own country, at some level you operate within certain comfort zones, and I wouldn't say complacency aa jati hai, but you at least are, you know that you have a certain market, and you have a certain market share, and you have a certain acceptance of your product. But it is when you start servicing the world is when you start to constantly gain in terms of productivity. You start competing with global firms, and you start thinking more on global lines. So supplying that same amount to your domestic market, and maybe that same uh, goods to the to the global markets or international markets
Right.
has different implications. So I think government of India too has recognized that, and what was earlier Make in India has been uh, tweaked to now become Make in India for the world. That is how the policy objective or the policy narrative is evolving, and I think it's a good sign.
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel, it is very important for India to position itself as a global player now. And the fact towards the end, you spoke about how it is very different to be supplying to your home country and supplying the same quantity globally. One really needs to up the ante and, hit above one's weight if they want to play the big league. Like with most other things, it also happens in trade and manufacturing. When you're building for the world, you need to hold yourself to a much higher standard, and that will eventually
Bilkul.
develop the entire economy, the entire state of businesses in India. We will level up in a way. So I feel that's an amazing perspective. That's an amazing thing to look at and watch out for as India progresses. And like you said, it is important that that happens for this entire story to play out. It is important that this happens for the entire India story, the great Indian growth story to play out. This is a very, very critical element. So, Tahir, very quickly, our comment section is full of several questions. I'm sure many people have many questions, but we'll try to pick one or two of them given the time that we have in hand. So, probably this question also draws upon, a couple of things that you said around China and its reopening. So, this question is probably an extension of what you have already been talking about, but nevertheless, let me just read it out. So, the question is, with China opening up, how do you see India positioned and faring going ahead?
So look, right now, China has gone through its own readjustment or internal, readjustment in in two phases. One is basically their own policy objectives and policy frameworks, and second is obviously their own, administrative changes that they've gone through. So that part of that uncertainty or that cycle that uh, which was confusing the world is kind of played out for China. I think they are now reasonably clear in terms of what they want to pursue, and they have the clarity of administration, policy, government, etc. in place. The second is that they have the other cycle, positive cycle that is developing for them is obviously their exit from COVID, and
Hmm.
which is at one level, मतलब what happened in India or any other part of the world 1.5 2 साल के लैग से वो अभी चाइना में हो रहा है. So we benefited all throughout the last 18 odd months. So वो जो एक cyclical benefit है वो शायद चाइना को आने वाले 12 18 महीने में they will run through that part. How does it fare after that is what is probably not clear, but I think they've got better control now in terms of their policy, in terms of their mindset and what they want to achieve than what they probably had a year or 2 years ago. So it will do well, maybe not of the type that of that growth that they were used to in the past, but they also have reconciled to the fact that for them now growth has to range more in the vicinity of 4 to 5% versus the earlier 8 7 8 9%. So I think as of now the world wants to probably think of it only as a tactical play, and अभी opening up हो रहा है, and it's been a languishing market, and maybe market valuations have also kind of struggled for a while, and uh, uh, like as I said, consumption can come back with a vengeance. And look,
Hmm.
even China, just like in the US, China maybe matlab, there is a huge amount of decent amount of saving, personal household savings, which have accreted over the last 2 years.
Hmm.
Uh, just as the way excess savings developed in the households in the US because
Hmm.
of government support, because of monetary support, as well as cost not being there and incomes being
Hmm.
reasonably steady during COVID. Those
Hmm.
surpluses were then spent by the US households and are still being spent by the US households, and they are managing their consumption.
Hmm.
Similarly, same thing has happened even with the Chinese, that over the last 2 years, they've also gone through accreting excess savings. Maybe in absolute terms, the magnitude will probably be one fourth or one third of the size of what the US households could accumulate. But it is still a fairly powerful number. And
Hmm.
I would think that is what will be used as a spending force by the Chinese consumer in the coming some time. So that is something which they will that is what will excite the markets, and that's why I said that China as a consumption market looks to be quite attractive, at least. Now, whether they can convert this into something which is a lot more structural remains to be seen. And in that context, that is why investors, when on an aggregate basis, I feel that global investors will look at emerging markets a little much more positively in the 2023 calendar year and beyond. Uh, Compared to 2022. But they will look at different countries differently. And like as I said, I mean, they'll go to China for consumption, but
Hmm.
they will come to India for manufacturing, industrialization, investments, infrastructure. That's the part which will probably, excite Indian. Investors who are looking at India is how the thing will change.
Absolutely. We remember you spoke about how the investment rationales are going to be swapped going ahead for India and China, wherein, India will be looked at for its industrialization and manufacturing prowess, whereas China will attempt to, most investment theses in China will attempt to ride on the consumption growth story there. So, Tahir, I feel that was very, very well put. One final question before we move towards the end of the conversation. It's a very interesting question because it seems to be coming up more, more often than not, since the past couple of months. And the question is around small caps as a segment. So the question is that small caps have been struggling since quite some time now. Do you think it is finally time to start allocating to small caps? Could 2023 be the year where small caps turn around?
Uh, so I don't know whether the turnaround will happen in 2023 itself, but I clearly see that uh, small caps has actually been this. See, in the market nervousness of the last 12, 18, 13, 12 to 15 on months, the one area which probably was at the receiving end, and जहाँ पे मतलब investor interest was clearly lacking, or there was anxiety, was visible in the small cap space. uh, uh, I, I think things have changed a little bit now in the last one and a
Hmm.
half months or so.
Yes.
But when I was looking at December 31st, 2022 data, small cap index had actually fallen about 16-17% year on year,
Hmm.
whereas Nifty and mid cap index had risen about 4 to 6%. Both were positive, but the small cap index was down almost 17%. So uh, uh, लोगों ने अपना जहाँ मतलब कंसर्न दिखाना था या एंजाइटी दिखाना था, वो दैट वाज विजिबल इन द स्मॉल कैप स्पेस.
Hmm.
So I think that is a good starting point, I would say, for small cap, because small cap investing में generally हमेशा मैंने देखा है कि मतलब you if you try to chase and if you try to ride the momentum, then you probably, whether you will get it very right or wrong, right or not, is somewhat debatable. But when you buy them at valuations which are a little more attractive, or when they've gone through the grind and uh, you know uh, uh, under performance, I think that is a better way to do it. So I think वो एक phase अभी भी जारी है on the small cap front, and that is something which makes that space quite attractive. So I think in a somewhat indifferent market, which I expect it to be, or insipid market which I would expect it to be for some time, uh, if somebody is still wanting to start building some element of risk and prepare for better returns, I think small cap is the space which one should take advantage of during the course of 23 in this somewhat lackluster period, and build some exposure out there. And I think when the cycle turns, then 24-25 can hold out to be a good opportunity for the small cap space. Small cap generally थोड़ा बहुत domestic economic cycle से ज़्यादा जुड़ा रहता है. So as we see India's economic cycle once again, after a pause in 22, after in 23, it starts to once again get into a more a brighter period. I think automatically small cap valuations will start to once again expand. Hopefully, if they by that time, if they start coinciding with a reversal in global monetary policies,
Hmm.
then it will provide further fuel to the fire.
Absolutely. Very, very solid insights, Tahir. This also brings us towards the close of this conversation. I
Thank
so
you.
wish I could have taken up so many more questions. These are very, very interesting questions. So sorry, guys, if I couldn't pick up all of them. Please write to us at research@fisdom.com, and we will try to respond to as many questions to the best of our abilities, or probably reach out to the team at Invesco and see if they could help. So please feel free to write to us. Meanwhile, Tahir, I feel this has been a super insightful conversation. बहुत कुछ हमें सीखने मिला, बहुत सारे पर्सपेक्टिव्स आपने शेयर किए.
I
We
hope so.
spoke about a variety of themes and sectors. So yeah, thanks a lot. It was really, really insightful and helpful.
I enjoyed it too, and thanks very much once again, Nirav, for hosting me, and all your patrons on Fisdom. I hope it's been an engaging session and an interesting one for you, and it's probably been time well spent for you guys. So once again, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Tahir. No, it was a wonderful episode. I personally enjoyed hosting you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.